A nerdy son, neglected by his wealthy parents throughout his life, was denied even the most basic necessities. Now his successful tech business has them accusing him of fraud and begging for his forgiveness. Hi everyone, I'm using a throwaway account because I don't want to clutter my main one. So I, 27 meters, launched my own business a year ago with the help of a couple of my college friends. We've been doing really well financially and are currently making a profit. A few days ago, my estranged parents, both 54, who hadn't spoken to me since I graduated, finally reached out. They asked if they could join as partners in my business because they wanted to invest in it. But I declined their offer. I didn't consult my friends because they were well aware of my strained relationship with my parents, and I wanted to keep them out of my business affairs. My parents had always neglected and belittled me while I was growing up, despite being the kind of child most parents would be proud of. Both of them were quite wealthy. My dad was a dental surgeon, and my mom was a CFO at a company. Despite growing up in a successful household, I was always ambitious from a young age. However, my parents were never supportive and often made fun of my nerdy tendencies. Despite their wealth, they barely provided for my basic needs, seemingly out of spite. It wasn't until later that I realized they resented me for not achieving the level of success they had hoped for. While they were successful in their own right, they never reached the level of fame they desired. I only learned the truth behind their animosity towards me when I confided in my aunt, my dad's younger sister, who was the only one who understood me when I was 16. She revealed the reasons behind their unreasonable behavior and hatred towards me, believing I was old enough to know. They held me responsible because they felt they had to invest time and money into raising me, believing that if they had dedicated the same resources to their careers instead of me, they would have achieved greater success. They only had me due to family pressure and didn't even desire a child. However, once stuck with me, they chose to deal with me by bullying and constantly making me feel inadequate. I'd say I missed out on a lot during my childhood because although they provided for everything financially, they offered no support. Whether it was small things like homework or bigger issues like schoolyard fights, they offered no assistance. If I ever asked for anything beyond absolute necessities, they would either dismiss me or, worse, ridicule me. They'd mock my appearance, especially because I was thin and had a nerdy look. If not that, they'd tease me about my love for computers, insisting I'd only amount to an IT guy and nothing more, deeming any investment in me a waste of money. I experienced severe emotional neglect, and these insults were what I grew accustomed to hearing while growing up. At the time, I didn't realize it was wrong. Instead, I believed there was something inherently flawed about me, causing my parents to not love me like other parents love their children. It was messed up, but it felt normal to me. During my teenage years, I started pushing back a bit, but my dad quickly shut it down and threatened to kick me out if I didn't comply. So I turned to confiding in my aunt, who repeatedly offered to intervene, but I was too afraid of the potential consequences. I knew my aunt couldn't take me in, and I didn't want to burden anyone else, so I endured the hardships at my parents' house. Whenever things got tough, I sought solace in talking to my aunt. However, once I learned the truth behind my parents' behavior, I decided to cut ties with them after college since they didn't want me. They had sent me to public school, which, forgive me for sounding conceited, I believed was a waste of my potential anyway. That should have been a clear sign that they didn't care about my education or me in general, but I still held on to some expectations from them. However, those expectations shattered when they informed me that once high school ended and I turned 18, I wouldn't have a place in their home unless I made something of myself. Furthermore, they declared they wouldn't pay for my college tuition either. I couldn't take it anymore and confronted them, insisting they couldn't do this to me because I knew I had a promising future. Being a straight student all my life, I believed I was on the path to success. But they remained firm, dismissing my potential and saying I shouldn't have such high expectations. They even went as far as to belittle me, suggesting that the highest position I could aspire to would be a lowly IT guy fixing computers for beginners in corporate offices. despite what my teachers and friends had led me to believe about my abilities. To be honest, it was a pretty absurd statement because even those supposedly lowly aid professionals are highly skilled and deserving of respect in their own right. Unfortunately, my ignorant and narrow-minded parents couldn't grasp that concept. I tried to reason with them, hoping to convince them to cover my tuition costs. I figured I could worry about accommodation later. However, they remained stubborn, so a few weeks before my 18th birthday, I left home and sought refuge at my aunt's house. While my aunt continued to advocate on my behalf with my parents, her efforts proved futile. Eventually, we decided that I would attend whichever college offered the highest percentage of tuition coverage through scholarships. Fortunately, I was accepted into a college with an 80% scholarship, and it boasted a respectable computer science program, which satisfied me. My aunt, who worked in sales and didn't earn as much as my parents, generously agreed to cover the remaining expenses. Despite her middle-class status, her support was invaluable, especially considering my reduced tuition fees as a scholarship recipient. I only returned home if it was absolutely necessary. Otherwise, I preferred to stay in my dorm, especially since my aunt often traveled for work. That was my plan for navigating college, and my life improved significantly once I left my parents' house. Without the constant worry and anxiety, I felt much happier and found it easier to make friends. It was through these friendships that I met my current friends and business partners. Together, we decided to establish our own egg firm, and things have been going relatively well since then. I didn't think my parents would take any interest in my life, considering they had shown little interest during my school years. However, when they learned that I was graduating college as valedictorian, they decided to attend the ceremony. Unfortunately, they couldn't enter because I hadn't purchased tickets for them, nor had I invited them, as we were not on speaking terms. After the ceremony ended, I was taken aback to find my parents standing with my aunt, who seemed just as irritated as I was, likely having dealt with them after the graduation. Although I had plans to go out drinking with my friends, I ended up spending the next 2 hours in my parents' hotel room, engaged in heated arguments and disputes. They were upset about not being invited to the graduation, whereas my aunt had been, and they demanded an explanation. It struck me as ironic because, well, they hadn't let me live with them, kicked me out at 18, refused to pay for my tuition despite being able to afford it, and subjected me to emotional mistreatment throughout my childhood and into adulthood. Frankly, I didn't feel they deserved an explanation, but I didn't want them causing a scene outside my college campus. So I reluctantly accompanied them to the hotel. However, before losing my temper completely, I made it clear that I never wanted to see them again and warned them that if they tried to contact me, I would take legal action to keep them away. With that, I left the hotel to meet my friends. I made it clear to my friends that I wouldn't let my parents ruin what should have been a joyous day for me. After that confrontation, I cut off communication with them completely. Later, my aunt informed me that they were disappointed and angry. They even discussed the idea of disinheriting me, but I wasn't fazed because I never expected to receive anything from them anyway. That was the end of our interaction, and it's been almost 7 years since we last spoke. Then, out of the blue, a couple of days ago, they called me. They had asked my aunt for my phone number, and she gave it to them, thinking they wanted to apologize. However, they didn't apologize for anything and instead went straight to proposing a business venture. They saw investing in me as profitable now compared to years ago. Naturally, I declined their offer, hung up, and blocked them. I shared the incident with my friends, but they understood why I declined without consulting them first, given my history with my parents. However, the very next day, my parents retaliated by posting a scathing message on Facebook, tagging me and all my friends. They claimed that I wasn't the self-made success I portrayed myself to be, but merely someone who relied on daddy's money to create a moderately successful business. They accused me of refusing to acknowledge the help they supposedly provided over the years. I was stunned by the Facebook post and was tempted to call them immediately to confront them. But before reacting, I decided to retaliate with something I had kept to myself for years. During my teenage years, when I still lived with them, I have recorded several videos documenting my daily life with my parents. I did this just in case I ever needed evidence to prove in court or elsewhere that they were terrible parents. However, I never shared these videos because I wanted nothing to do with them. I feared that if I posted these videos showing their rude behavior, mocking me, and treating me poorly, there would be consequences. At the time, I didn't want any drama, so I let it go. However, their Facebook post changed everything. Feeling compelled to respond, I finally decided to share those videos. Perhaps I was in the wrong here. Using my public profile on Instagram, I wrote a lengthy caption explaining my history with my parents and uploaded the videos to call them out. Once that was done, I contacted my lawyer to update her on the situation. However, she was already one step ahead and began the paperwork to file a defamation lawsuit against my parents for their actions. She also planned to contact my business partners to gauge their willingness to join the lawsuit since their names had been dragged into the Facebook post as well. Several comments had already appeared on their post from some of my relatives and friends of my parents, applauding the exposure and vowing never to work with us again, providing us with solid grounds for legal action. I forwarded those screenshots to my attorney for future reference and informed my business partners so they could stay informed. After completing these steps, I waited for my parents to reach out, expecting them to beg for forgiveness. A few days later, they did call me, but not to apologize. Instead, they demanded an apology from me, claiming I had made a mistake by posting those videos. They argued that while they had posted their rant about me on their personal Facebook accounts, limiting the audience, I had shared it on my public profile, potentially reaching a larger audience due to my significant number of followers. They insisted I take down the post immediately because people were already sending them hateful messages, and some were even threatening them. They warned that this could ruin their careers, as the videos portrayed them poorly, and if their employers saw the posts, they would face serious consequences. Feeling defensive, I asserted that they deserved what was happening and promptly ended the call. However, I archived their posts and switched off my phone for a while. When I eventually checked my email after a couple of hours, I found a message from my parents. They expressed regret for past events but condemned my retaliation, highlighting that sharing personal videos without their consent could lead to legal repercussions for me. They hinted at being served with a defamation suit and demanded I retract my actions, warning of the potential consequences if I didn't comply. I discussed the situation with my business partners, who unanimously agreed that we should proceed with the lawsuit. They believed we had acted ethically and refused to back down, unlike those who had resorted to lies and distortion to discredit me. Despite their support, I couldn't shake the guilt, especially after receiving an apology via email. I knew the lawsuit would bring negative consequences for all involved, adding to my uncertainty. I'm torn about what to do next. Despite their apology, am I wrong to pursue legal action against my parents for defamation? Update 1. Hi everyone, I've made the decision to move forward with the lawsuit, and there are a few reasons behind it. Firstly, this wasn't a decision made solely by me. My friends are also involved. Although their posts didn't garner as much attention as mine did initially, it still had the potential to harm my business. Their intention was to tarnish my reputation and that of my firm, so I believe pursuing defamation is justified. Moreover, their apology doesn't hold much weight, as it seemed more about protecting their own careers rather than genuine remorse. Reflecting on my past, I realize I've often avoided confronting my parents due to fear, even into my late 20s. It took comments from some of you to make me realize just how many opportunities I've had to speak out, but didn't due to that fear. However, I now understand that I hold the power, and they can't intimidate me anymore. Despite their apology, which felt insincere, I'm determined to proceed with the lawsuit. I've been accommodating for too long, especially to people who don't deserve it. The treatment I endured from my parents was cruel, and no child should experience that. Now that I have the chance to seek justice, I won't hesitate to take it. I've taken the high road for too long, but there's no reason to continue when they persist in targeting me just to satisfy their ego. It's unacceptable, and I refuse to tolerate it any longer. Update 2. Today, my aunt reached out to inquire about my decision regarding the situation with my parents. I informed her that we were proceeding with the lawsuit, which seemed to satisfy her. She expressed pride in my decision and offered an apology for not doing more when I was younger. I reassured her, acknowledging the challenges she faced at the time and appreciating the support she did provide when it truly mattered. Despite my family's admiration for my parents, I recognized that revealing their true nature would likely not be believed, and my aunt's intervention might have led to undesirable outcomes. While she's not flawless, her efforts on my behalf mean the world to me. As for my parents, I haven't communicated with them since their email, and it seems they're waiting for me to withdraw the lawsuit. However, it's been 4 days, and we decided to pursue mediation first before considering court proceedings. Our goal is to reach an out-of-court settlement, given my parents' financial resources and culpability in this matter. Despite their attempts to paint me as the villain and jeopardize my business, I've remained steadfast in my resolve. Their desperate attempts to equate our actions only serve to highlight their deceit, whereas I merely sought to reveal the truth. Once mediation is concluded, I'm tempted to re-release the videos, as their true selves deserve to be exposed to the world. Update 3. Today, the court finalized the mediator for our negotiations, and we were promptly informed. Shortly after, my parents called me. I had temporarily unblocked them for this conversation to inquire about when I planned to withdraw the lawsuit, as they felt things were spiraling out of control. I made it clear that withdrawal wasn't an option, which sent them into a frenzy. The call descended into chaos, with their angry voices barely coherent amid the shouting. Eventually, I ended the call to escape the tumult. However, they immediately called back, and this time it was my father who took the lead. He accused me of provoking him and insisted that my actions wouldn't intimidate him. I stood my ground and delivered my own barrage of truths, expressing all the pent-up frustration and resentment I had harbored for so long. While the exchange was harsh, it was cathartic, and I feel a sense of relief after finally vocalizing my feelings to them. After ending the call, I refused to entertain further arguments and promptly hung up. However, they persisted in their attempts to sway me. They contacted my aunt, fabricating a narrative that I was suing them for baseless reasons, which couldn't have been further from the truth. Their manipulation tactics have lost their effectiveness over time, especially with my aunt, who wasn't easily swayed. Unmoved by their pleas, she echoed my stance, offering sympathy but making it clear that their behavior was unacceptable. Threatening to involve the authorities if they continued to harass her, she effectively shut down their attempts. Following this exchange, there was a temporary respite from their barrage until the evening. It seems my parents had resorted to a desperate strategy, contacting every family member to garner support. Consequently, I received a flood of identical messages from various relatives, all echoing my parents' false narrative. It was painfully obvious that my parents had orchestrated this campaign, hoping to pressure me into relenting. Their concerted efforts to salvage the situation only served to highlight their desperation now that they realized the gravity of their predicament. Update 4. The proceedings have commenced, and we're currently on a lunch break. I'm jotting this down while riding the subway. Despite my parents' aggressive demeanor, it's evident that they're on the losing end. If they want to avoid court, they'll need to acquiesce to our terms. I'm fortunate to have such supportive friends and business partners who stood by me throughout this ordeal. Their unwavering support means the world to me. Just moments ago, one of my friends offered a listening ear, recognizing the emotional toll this situation has taken on me. Despite the challenges posed by my parents, I'm grateful for the blessings in my life, including loving friends and an aunt who cares deeply for me.